rồi vui thư
And board members and superintendent, as usual, I'll work through every item on the agenda, and if there's something that you'd like to pause, or superintendent, if you have staff prepared that we'd like to bring forward, please just let me know. All right, of course, the first item of business will be called to order. The second item will be the approval of the agenda, and I've been handed 3 agenda changes that at this juncture I need to read for the record. Committee and staff reports added item 7.5, pilot of Raptor, possible replacement of current school check-in system. Consent agenda, item 8.12, proposed fiscal year 2017-2018 salary schedules for administrative, managerial, professional, technical, and temporary personnel was moved to Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations, item 9.15. And then added item 8.40, payroll calendars for 2018-2019. Then moving further down the agenda in section 3, we have recognitions. 3.1 will be the recognition of the 2017 Rain Barrels on Parade participants, presented by Alan Baggett, Executive Vice President of the Building Industry Association. Section 5, public comment. Section 6, administrative and personnel appointments. And then Section 7, committee and staff reports, workshop only. 7.1, in-county travel paid for the period of February 22nd through March 21, 2018, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.2, out-of-county travel paid for the period of February 22nd through March 21, 2018, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 7.3, update on current lease agreement with the City of Fort Walton Beach, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director, Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. And Mr. Bolton, I see you already moving forward, sir. Please come forward.
Just to explain what is happening, we received information from the City of Fort Walton as they are creating a little classroom behind their fire station adjacent to the OTC campus, and that is a property that we lease to them, and they are just letting us know they were wanting to do that. So I've coordinated with Mr. McInnes and also have Tom Cox, our building official, because we have overall responsibility for that property, so they'll be going through him to ensure it is constructed to standards.
Yes, sir.
That was my main question, was from a liability standpoint, risk management will also be involved in looking at the structure and checking for liability. And are we liable for?
That would go through Mr. Cox, not through Mr. Frake's office. The city, under the lease, the city can use the property for fire training facilities, and so this is an additional classroom for that purpose. They will be responsible for all the cost of construction and everything else they do, but they are letting them know that Mr. Cox will need to be inspecting that property because it is school district land that they're building on.
But from a liability insurance standpoint, if there was ever an issue later on with the facility that they're constructing, is that something that we've reviewed from a risk management, or does the agreement have them cover
It's not
any
my understanding
insurance?
that we would insure the building. They would have all of that covered through the city, not through the school district. So that would be their responsibility.
And that's part of the agreement that we have with them in that lease?
The lease agreement, I believe,
Okay.
would address that.
I think you're asking for the attorney to check and verify that, Mr. McInnes?
Sure.
And maybe get back with Mrs. Thrush. You two can, and then if you need to bring forth some kind of separate item, then we can do that too. Okay? Any further questions for Mr. Bolton before he rushes back to his seat? Where he bolts. All right, thank you, Mr. Bolton. All right. Item 7.4. Okaloosa County School District School Board audited financial statements for fiscal year ended June 30, 2017, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. Mrs. Scallon, do you have any commentary about this that you would like to present, or board members, do you have any questions?
An electronic copy was attached to the agenda information you received. I also have a hard copy to provide to you.
Okay.
But as you look through the audit, what you will see is that we have an unmodified opinion, which means that there were no findings, that our financial statements are presented in an accurate fashion, and that they've tested internal controls, and that based on the auditing standards that they're guided by, that there are no findings and that everything looks in order.
Very good.
Any questions?
Well, I just had some brief comments.
Okay.
Just that I hope members of the public take time to read the published financial statements, maybe not necessarily the nitty-gritty numbers that are presented, but you know, there were some comments made by the audit report that just shows that we've had, for the year that they were auditing, that we had a decrease in property tax revenues, and that was because of the required local effort, rollback rate, and that's something that the legislature sets. And that while property values have increased, people's actual school millage rate has decreased, and it's the lowest it's been in, I believe, 27 years.
Yes,
And then also just talking about instructional expenses, it went on to say that instructional expenses represent almost 62% of expenses, and that we had an increase in that due to increased enrollment and the class size requirement that we have, but also that we've had increased cost associated with employees. So not only benefits with health insurance, but also with the retirement. So that we've been having to contribute to employees' FRS or their 401k plans. So it was interesting. It also commented on the centralized budgeting or hybrid model that the board and your staff and the superintendent have implemented, and how that it seems to have worked well in allocating adequate resources to the schools. But then it went on to continue the discussion that our capital resources are in dire straits, and basically because of the lack of funding combined with the age, our facilities and the needs of those aging facilities. So I hope members of the public take time to read it, at least to scan through it, because there is important information in there.
There is, and you've done a good job kind of recapping the highlights of what was in the report.
All right, anything else? Board members?
I would just like to comment.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Scallon, and I think the board would agree, we are very fortunate to have you as our CFO, and thank you for all your hard work and what your team has done to get us to this point. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's all of us as a team
Right,
working together.
Good job. Thank you, Ms. Scott. All right, moving down to item 7.5, pilot of Raptor, possible replacement of current school check-in system. And board members, please note that this is an information item, and I see Mr. Mitchell approaching the podium, so thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for that, and please let us know what's going on.
As all of you are aware, that we have a requirement that as a visitor comes to a school that they be screened due to the Lunsford law. And it's a pretty simple process. Folks go to the school, they want to visit a classroom, or they want to eat lunch with a kid, or whatever they want to do. They take their driver's license, system scans it, they're cleared, and they can proceed. The system that we've currently got in place has been having some issues, and we are looking to replace it. We have found another company We've vetted it with about a dozen schools who all seem to really like the new system that we're looking at, and we're planning to do a no-cost pilot at 5 locations as soon as possible. And by that I mean this company is ready to come in about 2 weeks and go ahead and do the installs and the training for those 5 sites. That would give us pretty much the month of May to run it through its paces to make sure schools are happy with it. And if they're happy with it, and assuming all goes well, we come back to the board for the full purchase, the full deployment plan for implementation for the start of next school year. But the pilot is an option. It's an opportunity to make sure that the problems we have with the current system don't follow us with the new system.
All right, questions or comments, board members?
I do, Dr.
Yes, sir.
So yesterday I met with Eric at Carver Hill, and one of the things that you brought up about the current company, I would like you, if you don't mind sharing that, what their capability now is.
Right. One of the issues that we've got is we've been with the company we currently have, School Check-In, for a long time. And while we were using them as an independent system, in other words, while they stood alone without connecting to the district, just the computer at the school, they did a pretty good job. When we had to move together with the volunteer system and with the other systems that we needed to do, that's when they started having trouble. And they have no longer been able to handle the amount of data that we're giving them. It's been quite evident that our data files that we transmit to them are some of the larger ones they receive, and their responses to us for that have been unacceptable for them to not be able to do. So what ends up happening is you go to a school, you've got a kid there, you try to check them out through the system, but the system allows you to check out students through this program, and it says you're not a parent. And parents don't like being told that's not their kids. So we've been having some issues that need to be replaced. The system needs to be replaced. And so this is our best pilot to go forward and do just that.
So I guess you guys have already done some evaluation then
Yes,
of this particular program.
Yes.
And it is the recommendation that this be the program we go with, I guess, pending a successful pilot.
That is correct.
Is that?
We will come, once, assuming the pilot is successful, we will come back to the board for the standard purchase process that we would do for a program this size.
Okay.
And we would give you at that time, we will give you a plan for deployment and everything that would be necessary to use this program for the start of next school year.
Do we have any idea whether this is going to be eligible for the new funds that the governor and the legislature are sending us? Probably not.
I have no idea. We've, up until now, the program has not been something we've used that type of funding for.
Okay.
I had a couple
Yes,
of
ma'am.
questions, Mr. Chairman. As part of the pilot, will we, because how are we going to coincide with the existing system at these 5 locations?
We're going to do a full file transfer. So
Okay.
what will happen, even on the volunteer side, so everything that's already approved, everything that's already done will just be lifted from the one system and put into the new system.
Okay.
So parents will not have a need to re-enter information of any kind. It won't work that way.
Okay.
The transition for the summer, when we go to a full district deployment, will be a similar transition if we were to stayed with the program. The people in the system will get an email saying, do you want to continue being a
Right.
volunteer? They say yes. They'll have to do what they have to do to move forward.
Some of our, especially at our larger enrollment schools, we have more than one barcode reader. Will the pilot program just have one barcode reader? How are we going to handle, for example, at
That's a good question.
our high schools that currently have 2 kiosks?
Right.
Is the pilot going to have 2 kiosks? Or are we
The
going to be
pilot-
comparing 1 kiosk to the
Actually,
old system that had 2?
The difference between the two systems is that the new system is a site license versus the old system, which is a system license.
Okay.
So if we go to, say, Niceville, which is one of the locations who has multiple kiosks, there is absolutely nothing from keeping us from giving them as many kiosks as they currently need.
Okay.
Versus the other system, we'd have to pay for every individual kiosk license that we put into place.
Okay.
So a nice piece about this system in the future, say we have a reason to send all the kids home from Davidson for some reason in the afternoon, and they have to do mass checkout. We've had some weather issues that have caused us parents to come in, and all of a sudden you get 100 parents to check out kids. With the new system, we could convert 10 or 12 laptops to be able to handle check-ins
Okay, good.
and do that in a much faster method than we can now with the system we currently have. So that's a nice benefit to the package.
Okay. If we are currently not, or if we have parents who are not showing up in some systems, the download or file transfer that you're talking about, you know, it'll show up correctly in the pilot?
That's correct.
Okay.
We're going to pull a master file from
Okay.
school check-in for the volunteers for those locations.
Okay.
So what we see at the district level and what the school sees are where the problem lies, because the information we have is correct. The information they have, for some reason, that's where the issue is.
Okay.
So as long as they're pulling off the
master.
the master that we've got, we should be fine.
Okay.
And just one other quick comment. This will help enhance our security within our schools at a quicker turnaround with getting people into the system.
Yes and no. The way we do volunteers, the system for volunteers is almost identical, with one exception. Raptor does require an on-site follow-through, which the other system did not, which is actually something schools have been asking for, so that's a plus. So to say that's faster may not be exactly true. To say it's more accurate would definitely be a positive there.
And I think accuracy is what we're
Accuracy is definitely better with this system as far as showing up, showing a driver's license versus you're cleared to go without one. That would be great.
All right, I don't see anyone else indicating
All
any
right.
further questions, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, so let's go on down to Section 8, and this is the long one. And here we go. Section 8, Consent Agenda. 8.1 will be the approval of the consent agenda. 8.2 will be the approval of the minutes of the special meeting of March the 6th, 2018, minutes of the workshop meeting of March the 8th, 2018, minutes of the regular meeting of March the 12th, 2018, minutes of the special meeting attorney-client session of March the 16th, 2018, recommended by the superintendent. 8.3, Florida School Board Association dues for 2018-2019 in the amount of $18,000, presented by Lamar White, Chairman, and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.4, appropriation of District 4 School Board member capital outlay funds to Bob Sykes Elementary School for flooring for 6 classrooms in the amount of $27,000, $268.97, presented by Mr. Tim Bryant and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.5, appropriation of District 5 School Board member capital outlay funds for Lewis School for the purchase of a hands-free intercom system for the single point of entry in the amount of $3,466.72, presented by Board member Melissa Thrush and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.6, Budget Amendment Number 6, Fiscal Year 2017-2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.7, Monthly Financial Statement for February 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.8, Invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.9, School Donations, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.10, Payroll Warrant Register and Accounts Payable Warrant Register for February 2018 totaling $23,267,906.28, and bank transfers for February 2018 totaling $195,000, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.11, authorization to appropriate federal impact aid funds and make a payment in the amount of $28,290 to charter schools and AMI Kids Emerald Coast, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.12, Move to Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations, items 9.15 proposed fiscal year 2017-2018 salary schedules for administrative, managerial, professional, technical, and temporary personnel. Presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Item 8.13, request to double fill the band director position at Baker School. Presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And I just wanted to take a minute,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, to thank Mr. I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name. I normally call him Tony Chiarito, for his leadership at Baker School. Not only is he the middle and high school band director, but he's also the middle and high school choral director. And to have somebody cover both those positions for all of those grade levels is just a humongous task, and he's done it very well. This spring, the marching band from Baker earned a superior rating at their marching band MPA, and their bands at MPA in the springtime, and their combined middle school and high school chorus also performed for their music performance assessments. So just a big shoes to fill for that position, and looking forward to more great fine arts programs coming out of Baker.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. All right, item 8.14. ITB 18-04, build a press box building at 2 high schools. Presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Jackson, I would like to call Mr. Koutsaratis up to address this particular issue. The reason why I'm calling Mr. Koutsaratis up is I've had some parents from Crestview High School with some concerns, and I see Mr. Bolton's coming up too. Thank you, sir. Bolton on up. And but I have some questions that I would like to ask you regarding this. Since the plans have yet to be seen by anyone besides what y'all brought to the table, is there any equipment plan of what's going to be put into the concession stand? Is there an equipment plan?
Okay, well, we did share the plans with Mr. Day, and so he has seen them, and he's okay with the plans. As far as equipment plan, we are building a concession stand.
Wait, no, it says
So
press box, right?
Well, it's a concession stand press box combo.
Okay. There you go.
And
All right.
so there's a little, can I give
Yes,
you
sir.
some background?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why you're up here.
All right, well, there we go. So we'll start with, I was at a meeting, and it was a coaches meeting, the meeting that we have every year, and I was sitting there listening to some lawyers speak about Title IX and what Title IX is and what it isn't, and what our responsibilities are in dealing with that. And as I sat there, this is about 1.5 years ago, as I sat there, I started to think, hey, wait a minute, I can think of a couple of facilities on our campuses, in our school district, that we might need to address. And so that's how this all got started. No one from the school, no one from the community ever came and said, hey, this is what we want. It was me sitting at that meeting going, hey, I recognize a possible problem here in the future, and I want to see if we can rectify it before it becomes an issue. And so that's the background. And at that point, I got with Mr. Bolton, and I said, Mr. Bolton, I want us to develop a basic plan for, in this case, what we had. Let me just back up a little bit. With Title IX, it is sport to sport. So, and it is per school. So and you mentioned Crestview High School. So at Crestview High School, we've got to look at the baseball facilities and how they compare to the softball facilities. It does, the volleyball and the football and the basketball facilities don't enter into the softball to baseball facilities. And so when we looked at that, we could see that that softball did not have a press box and they did not have a concession stand. Their concession stand was out of a trailer. And so my direction to Mr. Bolton was, let's come up with a district standard for the district, so that we can, if we have a situation and we need to build a press box or a combo, in this case, press box and concession stand, that we would have a standard to go to, recognizing that we don't have the capital funding to build a grandiose plan, and recognizing that in some cases in the past we have met with schools and our scope kind of started to get larger and larger, and our budget started to get larger and larger, and we had issues there in the past. So this was a way for me to say to Mr. Bolton and to the schools, hey, let's try to help you. Let's give you a basic plan, and so that's what we've developed. And so, I mean, if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But I've got more to say as well. But
yeah, I got a couple more. And you know, the other thing that one parent actually contacted me via telephone, and I gave him your phone number in regards to using the idea of a multi-purpose, not just necessarily for softball. In the case of Crestview High School, if people are aware, Jack Foster Stadium butts right up against the softball field, and they were wanting to, you know, tie it in during football season to use as a multi-sport concession. So I think their complaint is that, you know, that obviously isn't going to happen the way they envisioned it. So
no, not the way they've envisioned it. There's no reason that softball concession stand couldn't be opened and used during a football game. It would be a lot closer to walk to the softball field than it would the opposite corner of the stadium to our current concession stand. So if the school decided to use it, they could, because it's right there at the end of the visitors' bleachers. But the way, and Mr. McGinnis, correct me or step in if I'm wrong, but the way I understand Title IX is that I don't think it would be in the spirit of the law to take a facility that we want to make comparable to the boys' facility and then say, well, let's see if we can adjust it and change it so that we can accommodate another boys' sport. And so that, I don't know if that's true or false, but you know, that's my understanding, is that we would want to put that concession stand in the best place for softball. We'd want to put it right behind home plate where it's most convenient for softball, not to tweak it and try to accommodate football as well, because the purpose is not to accommodate football in this case. But
do we already have adequate concession press box facilities for football?
Well, I would say they're adequate. They could use more. I think anyone can always use more with some of the big games that Niceville, Crestview, Fort Walton Beach, and Choctaw and Baker have.
So there's currently no visitor side concession
correct.
stand?
That is correct.
Now, for big games, we have been able to bring in a trailer.
We have, right. And I've talked to Mr. Day about a possibility on his dime to put a concession stand on that end of the stadium if that's what he wanted to do. That's my best answer for that one, Mr. Bryan.
Well, and I do have one question that actually came from the parent that he wanted me to ask, but the master plan for facility improvements in the future, do we have?
We do, and I'm going to let Mr. Bolton answer that in a second. But I wanted to go ahead and mention a few things, if I may. So let me just make sure I've covered what I've got here. So the design on both of these schools, we have Fort Walton Beach and we have Crestview, and so we saved money. My whole point is try to be a good steward of the taxpayer's dollar, and not to waste money and try to save wherever I can. That's been something I've tried to do the whole time that I've been in this position. And so by getting a standard for the district, having those plans engineered, building basically the same concession stand at Fort Walton as we are, it's a concession and press box combo at Fort Walton and Crestview. We've saved money on the engineering costs. We engineered one concession stand. We're using the same plans for both locations, and now we have a blueprint. We have a way to, if we had a need say at a middle school, if they wanted to duplicate that, those plans are already engineered, and we could put that anywhere in the district. And so that is there. We did consult with the health department, and so when Mr. Bolton began the designing of this facility, he consulted with the health department, because it is the health department that comes in and tells us, hey, you need a 3-compartment sink, you need a separate hand washing sink, this is what you need. And so we had our designer and Mr. Bolton and the health department getting input to make sure that we have everything we need in those facilities to meet the health department's standards and qualifications. So, Mr. Bolton, if you could address.
Just a couple of things.
Yes, sir.
If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Storch. Board members, I would call your attention to the recommended action. And it says, motion to approve the committee's recommendation to award this particular build the press box concession stand. And I'm wondering if you might just tell us a little bit about the committee, Mr. Kutsaratos.
Okay, and I'm not sure what committee we're referring to.
Well, it's the recommended action on the agenda item.
Yeah, it's talking about the committee for the bid.
The committee for the bid. I got you. Yes, sir.
So you had a committee that reviewed.
Okay,
That
and
may be Mr. Bolton.
that was Mr. Bolton,
Okay.
Bill Smith, and Tom Cox. So
Okay.
I can let Mr. Bolton answer
All right,
that.
then I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. The committee members reviewed the bids. Of course, if as long as a low bid meets the standard that is specified, in this case, engineered drawings, and we did call references and verify that the recommended low bidder is good, and so they met all those qualifications, and so the committee, by statute, is obligated to go with the low bidder. So that's how we came up with that. How we came up with the low bidder recommendation. To address then your last question, Mr. Bryant, as far as the master plan, of course we have a 5-year capital work plan that the board approves every year. We primarily, obviously, focus on the upcoming year because it's a moving target as population shifts and a classroom is needed at a different school. As we identify those things, monies are redirected to either buy a portable, create a classroom, is maybe the project at Richburg we're trying to do. Things like that come up that cause us to redirect our work plan, but our capital plan, but that is consideration is done every year to readdress the constant changing conditions of the school district. Right. And so, yes, we have that work plan that's available on the website. Right. And the other thing I would say is that the Fort Walton and Crestview softball concession restroom is comparable to the baseball. Both Fort Walton and Crestview baseball teams have that type of setup arrangement. The other two I'm talking the major high schools, Niceville and Choctaw, did self-help projects to create their concession restroom press box facilities that they have. So you won't find the same thing necessarily at those. Niceville, actually, though, is where we took that template. They kind of took the lead and had the press box concession, and we worked with them on that self-help project, and that was kind of the template we used to develop Fort Walton and Crestview's set of plans. So we didn't recreate the wheel.
Right. Well, and I understood the master plan. That's why I wanted you to explain, so because we are live streaming this right now and the general public can hear it, that it's a moving target year to year. So this might not have been on the master plan a few years ago, but we got money to be able to do it, so we had to react to it. But going back to the committee issue, Nick, I know I talked to you about this yesterday, but I think in the future on those committees, I think it would be great to maybe put the principal of that school on the committee, just to maybe give them some input or something like that, or just, would that be something we could consider?
And yes, sir. And we do in some cases, specifically when it's a project that's generated from the school. In other words, the idea was conceived at the school and brought to us. We keep them involved in all that. Going with trying to establish the district standard, and Mr. Kutsaratos already addressed, we have the 3-compartment sink, we have the hand wash sink, all the electrical will be in there to plug in whatever type of appliances that will Each school will want to put in there what setup works for Fort Walton may be a little different for Crestview, so they'll have that flexibility.
All right, Mr. Bryant, is there anything else, or is that,
sir.
okay?
Thank you,
All right,
sir.
Ms. Thrush, I know you had something, so please go ahead, ma'am.
What is the softball programs? What are the softball programs at Fort Walton Beach and Crestview currently doing for concessions and a press box?
Crestview has the trailer concessions that we've had since about '01 or '02. Very old, and that's what the health department has tried to get us away from because they don't meet their health department standards. There is no press box at Crestview. Fort Walton has no press box, and their concession, I believe, is run out of the right field old building, a
Right.
dugout or
Right.
storage or something is what it was before. And let me just go back to this Crestview Stadium, if you will. The concession for the stadium was with the original stadium. On the back side, near the restrooms, for each on each side was a concession stand, both visitors and home side. Those have been turned into something else at those locations. So they were given those facilities originally. Now, many principals and coaches and such have gone through there since then, but just want to say that facility had concession originally.
And I guess my follow-up question kind of segues off your last comment that each site location is different. So for example, at Choctaw, the concession stands at the football field are used for multiple sports.
Yes.
It's
Yes,
not
ma'am.
just for football. They're used for track and field, for soccer. And I mean, those are small concession stands that, you know, I'm sure aren't the same as, you know, the mandated health department requirements. So do we have a plan to replace those? And I guess, you know, each location is different. So whereas a softball field at Niceville is not near anything else. I mean, you literally have to cross a road to get to other athletic facilities, where we have some athletic facilities that could coincide with other areas. I understand the need and desire and appreciate, you know, trying to standardize. But where it could be multi-purposed, is that something we're not going to look at? Because we currently do have multi-purpose concession stands at other locations.
We have done that in a few situations. For example, Davidson, Bruner, we moved a portable there and created both restroom facilities, concession facilities, and a little bit of storage, and they service both baseball and softball at those two locations. At Ruckle, a portable was moved there to service both the softball and the tennis courts. So those were co-located. At Niceville, the baseball and the football stadium are able to use the same visitor side concession. So where we have an opportunity to do what you're talking about, that's what we try to do. But keep in mind, each sport, that parent organization that runs that concession must apply for a permit to run the concession. So it as the sport changes, a different set of parents go in there, and they have to work with the health department, pay for the permit, and get their menu approved, all those things. And most of those groups know that. But I just wanted you to know that you don't leave the supplies in there from football, and as it changes to soccer, they use those same things. So
I'm aware of, you know, all the food is separate and stuff like that, but the actual facility. So, and again, I'm not trying to change the plan, but, you know, as Steve just stated, Niceville's baseball and their visitor side concession stand are shared. What are the issues about sharing at Crestview?
There's no issue with sharing.
Okay.
I mean, that concession stand could be used, as I stated earlier, during a football game. It's not in the ideal place for the football game.
Okay.
It's in the ideal place for the softball program.
Okay.
It's right behind home plate. It's where you'd want the press box to be in a softball game, right behind home
Right.
plate. And so it is in the ideal place for the softball field. It would have to move, 20 yards to be in the ideal place for a football game.
Because the
And-
press box is on top of the concession
Exactly,
stand. You would
exactly,
almost have to
which-
do a press box and then a
Separate.
separate concession stand.
Right.
Okay.
And so in this case, if you're a football fan, you'd walk 20 more yards to the concession stand. I mean, it's not,
Okay.
I don't think it's
not
not prohibitive.
that it couldn't be
Exactly.
multi-purpose, it's just the location of it.
In
Okay.
my discussions with Mr. Day, he plans on using it for the football games.
We just need to put a walk-through gate in.
Right.
Okay, anything,
I've
Mr. Destin?
got
All
a
right.
couple of questions. Mr. McGinnis, compliance with Title IX is a legal analysis, basically. Have you looked at this issue to determine that this is necessary or that it will improve our compliance with Title IX?
I haven't looked at this particular issue, but I was probably the attorney making that presentation at that coaches meeting because I do that every year when we do it, remembering that we are still following an agreement that this district reached many years ago over a Title IX lawsuit. And that was not just a one-time agreement. We agreed we would, keep reviewing, and so it would be correct that if you had the facility on the baseball field for both press box and concessions, and you did not have that facility at softball, we need to take care of that.
So this is your recommendation?
If they don't have those facilities, I certainly would recommend that it be corrected, yes, sir.
Okay. This is $108,000. And I have the same reservations about the bid committee that Mr. Ryan has expressed. As a matter of fact, we discussed it the last time we came forward with a bid committee that was made up entirely of staff and the people that are in that position that are actually working on this. That gives me a great deal of heartburn. We need to have some other folks on these bid committees other than 3 people who work in the same shop. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the issue of how we came to the conclusion and whether or not it's something that we have to do and spend $108,000 on right now. So, so far I'm not sold on it. I'm sure this will be pulled from the agenda so we can talk about it some more.
All right, that was.
Pulled from the consent.
Yes, sir, that was the thing that I was going to mention, that right now, this particular item is resident on consent. And should a board member wish to move it to discussion, item 8.14, you can declare that at this juncture now, or we can wait until Monday night, or we can just leave it.
I will be inclined to pull it and have some more discussion.
All right, very good. Okay, anything else about that? Okay. All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, folks, let's go ahead and move to 8.15. ITB 18-07, Custodial Equipment and Repair Services, district-wide. Presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And I guess, the only comment that I have here is this is, again, our attempt to standardize on supplies district-wide. It's just unfortunate that we don't have, very many bidders. We received 2, and then they're non-responsive on many of the items that we had listed. It's just an ongoing issue we have, not just with supplies, but in general with construction and maintenance related items. So I don't know if that's a product of the area that we live in, or if it's possible to reach out to neighboring districts, and I know our purchasing department does a great job of using tag-on bids and things like that when we're able to. But, again, these products are what visitors to our campuses use and see, and our students and instructors use every day in our restroom facilities, and our custodians use to clean our buildings with. So I appreciate the effort to standardize, just wish we could get more opportunities to, receive more bidders for these items.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. All right, 8.16, ITB 18-12, asphalt paving, repair, seal coating and striping, concrete curbing and sidewalks, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.17, ITB 18-13, replace electrical main switchboard and panels at Crestview High School, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White, I have a
Yes, sir.
question
Yes, sir.
for Mr. Bolton. I have a question regarding this, and I apologize that I didn't call you yesterday, but I understand that this is going to be done over the summer, and it's pretty much going to leave most of the school without power for a couple of weeks. And I think the big question is, how are we going to address the issue with that part of the school that's not going to have electricity, it being 100+ degrees, humidity, afternoon rainstorms, what are our plans in place for that?
Our plans are, once this is approved, we'll have a pre-construction meeting. We'll set up some, when we know the timeline exactly when the contractor's going to be there, we'll get some generators and try to create some airflow into the schools by plugging in some of those large hall fans and try to at least keep some. Mr. Day also had a good idea. There's some things that you can hang up that absorb water in the classroom. So we'll be looking at that to do that.
Thank you.
So is that the length, 2 weeks, we think?
Approximately. I mean, the contractor will, once he gets started and we develop the plan, but we'll have a pre-construction meeting with the school.
Yes,
They'll
sir.
know everything up front. We're going to move his operation to an area that's on a different meter, so they will, those 12-month employees will have a place to relocate to.
Well, I've been through that with the renovation of a complete school, and I mean, I get it. So 2 weeks, I mean, sometimes we've had to do the whole summer.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes,
all
sir.
right, Ms. Rush.
I mean, I would just echo the humidity is the concern, and just having to mitigate, mold or mildew issues.
But there really
later on.
There's not really another option. If you tried to bank on 2 weeks at Christmas, and something go
Right.
wrong, we show up and no power. So there's no other time frame for this.
Can you also, just for the public, kind of explain why we're having to do this? Crestview is, over 50 years old.
This is the original main shutoff to the power for the main building, and you cannot shut it off. So this is a safety issue, and we've had two situations there. If you recall, 4 years ago, we had a transformer in one of the wings get hot and create a lot of smoke and did some damage in 2014. We also had a transformer blow that was right near the mechanical room where the main electrical switch is. In either case, we can't show up and pull that lever to shut off the main power to the school, and that is necessary for a lot of different safety reasons. So we must replace this.
Anything else, board members? All right, thank you, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you.
We got another one on here, but we'll see. All right. 8.18, renewal of ITB 16-04 Network Infrastructure Equipment E-rate, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.19, tag-on bid renewal of ITB 15009-EST cosmetology equipment and related supplies, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director, Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.20, tag-on bid over $25,000, International Restaurant Distributors Incorporated, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director, Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.21, tag-on bid purchase over $25,000, William Scotsman, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
I mean, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
would just make a comment that it's unfortunate that we're having to buy portable classrooms, but again, when you look at the funding sources that we have, we can buy 6 portable classrooms for $220,000 and millions of dollars to build a wing to provide classrooms. So we don't have those funds, and we have closed open enrollment at many of our schools in the county, and so this is a way we're having to alleviate some of those enrollment issues, but it's something that we're not going to be able to keep putting off. We're running out of space at some of our facilities to even add portables. So that's the only comment I had.
All right, Ms. Thrush. Exactly right. All right. 8.22, tag on bid purchase over $25,000, train, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bolton, I didn't get to call you about this either. It states KG, so I'm assuming this chiller won't service the entire facility located at the STEM Center, or is it just KG, meaning I remember where that chiller is, right on the back side of that
It
pod?
services the kindergarten building
Okay.
to the west.
Okay. And that's where we'll be having pre-KD students potentially in the fall. And it's something that stopped working or has been limping along.
Been limping along, and because we haven't had anyone in there full time, and it's one of those where it's either real cold or not.
Right,
So
yep, I remember those classrooms. And again, that facility is over 60 years old,
Yes,
or close to 60 years old.
That's just a small chiller compared to what we normally are
The
discussing.
main chiller that's over by the
Yes.
cafeteria.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. All right. 8.23, tag on bid purchase over $25,000, Shaw Industries Incorporated, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.24, tag on bid purchase over $25,000, International Restaurant Distributors Incorporated for Fort Walton Beach High School and Edge Elementary School, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr.
Go
Chairman,
ahead.
if I could
Yes,
ask
ma'am.
Mr. Anderson, I think I see him hiding in the
Yep.
back
That's
there.
what these workshops are for. No problem.
And again, I didn't get a chance to call you about this, but it looks like a significant amount of equipment, at least in the Fort Walton Beach High School cafeteria.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, another facility, that's our youngest high school at 50 years old. So is this to replace existing equipment that's no longer working, or are we adding a food service line? Can you kind of?
Yes, we looked at the age of the equipment and the cost of repairing some of them, and so, Niceville was refurbed like 3 years ago, and so we're just kind of looking at where, we're nonprofit, where can we use the funds that we're making to best serve the students? And so Fort Walton Beach High School has some old equipment. We've had to replace, work on their pizza oven, for example, 3 times this year, and so we're just piecemealing it together to make it run through the rest of the year, and we just decided, let's get rid of some of the older equipment and replace it with the new stuff.
Okay. And then likewise at Edge, we're replacing some.
Serving lines, right, they're old, and again, is it cost effective to continue to put $5,000–6,000 to fix the machine, where we're doing that every year as opposed to just replacing it and, making sure that lasts for 10, 12, 15 years.
And then the previous one that we have already passed over was just, a bunch of related items, but that could be used at multiple or different facilities throughout the district. I think milk cartons, containers.
That was a grant that Ms. Juliana Davis wrote for food services that we were awarded. And so Mary Esther Elementary and Laurel Hill are the beneficiaries of that grant. And so
Okay.
those things are specifically, it was
For
set up in the
those.
grant for those specific schools to get that equipment.
Okay.
And I appreciate on 8.24, the fact that on the budget source, you've indicated those would be federal funds.
Yes,
that-
sir,
that we
absolutely.
received. Right. Anything else, board members? All right, thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Sir.
All right, still moving through consent. 8.25, tag-on bid purchase over 25,000 international restaurant distributors for Fall Long Beach High School, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.26, exempted purchase over $25,000, Apple Incorporated, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
wanted to thank Ms. Ellis. She had sent, I believe, all school board members just an update of expenditures for this DODEA grant and the ability to purchase this technology equipment to aid those schools, and also our curriculum department in helping to facilitate training for those curriculum programs. So thank you.
All right, very good. 8.27, exempted purchase over 25,000 learning.com, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
And Eric, this is our single login. Does this go to the, and I'm going to forget the name of it now, the ability that we opened up this year for students to sign in and then see all their different apps, or is this different?
This is different.
Okay.
What you're talking about is
ClassLink,
ClassLink,
yeah,
and this program is inside ClassLink. Learning.com is what we're using for our requirement for training students on digital citizenship.
Okay.
So it ties back to E-rate funding. So we have this requirement, so we use Learning.com. It's a CAN training program that all teachers can use to train their students on digital citizenship, and it's a K through 12 program, and it's designed around, first graders get the first grade version, 12th graders get the 12th grade version. So it's a very nice program for doing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. No problem. All right, 8.28, service agreement number 18-77, Tyler Easterling, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.29, service agreement number 18-79, Raven Art Supply, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, I know Ms. Dale's
That's
here,
fine.
and I didn't contact Amy. These are at our Aspire schools.
Yes, that's correct.
So just for the remainder of this school year?
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I believe you said, but for next year? we're-
At this point, for next year, we're still uncertain. We'll be looking at the budget and determining that.
Okay. And again, the Aspire program is a great program after school, where students get food as well as.
As well as tutoring and enrichment activities.
activities.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. 8.30, service agreement number 18-80, Children's Home Society of Florida, presented by Mr. Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, 8.31, sale and disposal of surplus property, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.32, disposal of surplus property, presented by Mr. Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White, I would like
Yes,
to
sir.
just make a comment to Steve, since we've been on you today. I just want to say thank you for all your efforts in this. I will tell people, if you come into Niceville here or even up to Carver Hill, you'll see a lot of things are finally getting taken care of that need to be disposed of or sold, so we can use those facilities for other more essential reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Bryan. All right, 8.33, spot survey submission to the Florida Department of Education for the purchase of portable buildings for classroom expansion as needed district-wide. Presented by Mr. Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.34, motor vehicle lease for disaster transportation services between the School Board of Okaloosa County and Air Force Enlisted Village Incorporated, DBA Hawthorne House, presented by Jay McInnes, Program Director of Transportation, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.35, Title IX, Part A, Education of Homeless Children and Youth for 2018-2019, presented by Amy Dell, Specialist, Title I and Title IX, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. We're getting close. 8.36, Summer Voluntary Pre-Kindergarten Program, VPK, for 2018, presented by Ms. Deborah Hahn, Principal, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I know Ms. Hahn is here, and I noticed we're just doing summer VPK only at Wright, and I know this is based on the number of students we've identified who would be interested in the program.
Yes, ma'am, and it's also because during the school year in the north end of the county, we have it at Southside, Northwood, and Laurel Hill, so many slots. In the north end, we want to give some slots to the south end as well.
Okay. And again, this is a great resource for students that are eligible who are 4 years old to get some education prior to beginning kindergarten. And again, we have certified teachers in our VPK program.
And an assistant.
And an assistant, okay. And how will we, I mean, I know you attached the brochure, and beyond having the brochure available at Wright, have we provided the brochure to some of our shelter locations in the
we have not,
south
and
end?
in the south end, and for this particular unit, for the summer program, they can take up to 12 children.
Okay.
There's only 12 slots.
Right.
So obviously, the children that they probably want to identify first are the children coming to Bright Elementary.
Okay.
So as they've come in to register for kindergarten, I think that that's been one of the things that they've
Okay.
advertised with them, and they send something home to the families as well, though, too.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, 8.37, Gifted Endorsement Add-on Program, presented by Ms. Denise McLaughlin, Professional Development Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to thank Denise for her efforts along with other district staff. Again, this is just a requirement for training that instructors who have the gifted endorsement or want to obtain the gifted endorsement need to take and develop, and as laws change and requirements change, a review of our procedures have to change, so I appreciate all the efforts that go into that.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. Item 8.38, Bruner Middle School request for course adoptions for 2018-2019 school year, presented by Mrs. Melissa Bowell, Secondary Curriculum Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.39, request to advertise a public hearing for adoption of revised job description for Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, presented by Ms. Lindsay Maxey, Specialist, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.4, payroll calendars for 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, finally, We got through all those. All right, Section 9, Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. 9.1, Employees on Administrative Leave, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.2, Deferred Retirement Option Program, DROP, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.3, Employee Hearing, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.4, Personnel Recommendations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.5, Employee Transfers, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.6, Employee Separations or Employment Separations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.7, Employee Suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.8, Employee Suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.9, Employee Suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.10, Employee Suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.11, Reinstatement Reimbursement of Sick Leave due to Line of Duty Illness, Injury, Medical Examination, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.12, Leave Without Pay, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.13, Addendum to the Master Contract between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa County Education Association, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to thank the negotiation members for all their efforts, both from the union side and from the district side of coming to an agreement, moving forward. Again, it's difficult when the legislature pushes things out far into the summer, and I think just for the general public to understand, not knowing from year to year what funding we'll receive and then what restrictions on that funding that we'll have, how that greatly impacts us and our ability to make plans, and while we do our best effort every year to really predict and adequately assign staff from year to year, I appreciate all the efforts from both sides. We're very fortunate in Okaloosa County compared to other districts, and I appreciate all the efforts that go into making that happen.
Thank you, Ms. Thrush. 9.14, Master Contract between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Okaloosa Education Staff Professionals effective July 1, 2017 through June 30, 2020, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.15, Proposed Fiscal Year 2017-2018 Salary Schedules for Administrative, Managerial, Professional, Technical, and Temporary Personnel, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, so that takes us to discussion agenda. And then Section 11, Construction Program Owners Representatives Business. Mr. Walker, do you have anything today, sir? Yes, sir, thank you.
I do have a question,
Okay,
Mr.
yes, sir.
Walker. Can you give us a quick update on Richburg?
Yes, in fact, we're meeting Monday, and hopefully we'll be able to finalize. We ran into some big problems with plumbing and electrical and everything in the world, but we plan to hopefully have it ready to bring to you board no later than probably the next board meeting, and because we're trying to meet a deadline of having some classrooms ready for the fall. But
Right.
Mr. Desta will hopefully have everything in place with Nick and Steve and everybody, and hopefully with the next board meeting be able to bring you some recommendations.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, Section 11, Information Technology and Seat Management Contract, 12.1 CACI Task Order Number 2-98, Southside Primary School CCTV Repair, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Seat Management Specialist, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. All right, Mr. Attorney, your business, sir.
Just one item for Monday night, the hearing that you're authorizing under 9.3, we'll be bringing a representation letter for Attorney Joe Hammonds to represent the district and superintendent to present that hearing. I'll be representing the board.
All right, so you need a motion to approve that?
On Monday night.
All right. All right, Superintendent, your business, ma'am.
I just have one announcement. We'll be meeting with Sheriff Ashley and his staff this afternoon to begin discussions going forward with the mandates that we've received from Tallahassee. I'll try to have a briefing for you after we have that meeting. Mr. Venuti is here, Lieutenant Venuti is here, and Mr. Pico is here, and I'm sure they'll be in that meeting. But we're looking forward to working through this. There's a lot to do and no money to do it. So we're going to have to be creative.
And that's part of that extensive legislation that was passed that's requiring us to do all of these kinds of things. All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, board members, it's time for board members' business and/or announcements. And Mr. Walker, I'll start with you, sir.
Don't have anything.
All right, Mr. Destin.
I think I'm completed for this morning. We've spent enough time.
Yes, sir. Ms. Rush.
I just wanted to mention that April is the month of the military child, and I know many of our schools will have different activities going on this month. Wearing purple, working with our military family life counselors. So again, we're very grateful to have those dependent students in our county and their families here for support of our school district. I also wanted to congratulate all the choral groups that had their performance in the Twin Cities Honor Choir. It's a unique performance to the Twin Cities area where we have elementary students, middle school students, and high school students performing. They also had a guest clinician from Mississippi working with our 5th grade students. It was a phenomenal performance this year, as always. I also wanted to point out that Ruckle Chorus had a choir of distinction at their MPA performance this year, and that is the 2nd year in a row for Ruckle Chorus to have a choir receive that choir of distinction, and just a phenomenal record by the students in that choral group. And then I also wanted to mention, and I believe board members are aware, that the Niceville High School robotics team were regional champs in Huntsville last month. That is huge. There were 43 other teams, but teams from all over the South. Mr. Schumann even mentioned there were teams from a team from Brazil and Michigan, and he's super excited. I saw him at Niceville yesterday, and I plan to go over to their arena, as he called it. I thought he was talking about the basketball arena on the college campus. He's like, no, our robotics arena in Villa Tasso. So I'm going there at 2 o'clock today. They have, I believe Channel 3 News is coming to do a story on them because they're competing against 4 other teams across the world in Houston later this month. So a great effort by those students, and of course Mr. Schumann and his phenomenal support for that group, and wish them the best of luck later this month.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thrush. Mr. Bryant.
Yes, sir. First, I would like to congratulate Christy Collinsworth. She's a 5th grade teacher at Bob Sykes Elementary, and yesterday Z96 came to the school and honored her as Teacher of the Month. And you know, it's because of great business supporters like Cumulus Broadcasting, who every month take the time to recognize our hard workings. We are very appreciative of that. Second, I'd like to thank another business, Costa Family McDonald's. If you haven't been up to Crestview, the oldest McDonald's is now the newest McDonald's, and I guess they put in some type of space theme or something like that. I mean, it's huge, but I haven't been in there yet. But they donated $500 to Northwood Elementary School as part of their grand opening celebration. Dr. White and fellow board members, I would also like to take a few minutes, if I can. Today we've been talking about infrastructure needs. Obviously there's things on the agenda that we discussed. Safety concerns with the recent shooting down in Parkland. I would like to take this opportunity to bring before our board the issue of the half-cent sales tax. I believe we owe it to the future of our school district to discuss the possibility of allowing the superintendent and her staff the opportunity to look into what would be required to bring a half-cent sales tax proposal to be voted on by the citizens of Okaloosa County in the November general election. In 2017, we were approached by a community-led group that was going to spearhead getting private fund to support a ballot initiative that would have been a mail-out ballot. And we voted unanimously to let this happen. The general public, I believe, needs to know that whatever issues the district is facing at this time, we cannot ignore the fact that our aging infrastructure is not going away. The proposed half-cent sales tax would be a measure that would help with our declining infrastructure needs and help with the safety needs of our schools. This tax would benefit the future of our school district, and I, for one, believe we need to be proactive on coming up with a solution instead of being reactive when issues come up. As we all know, state funding for public education continues to decline each year, and school districts are being required to do more with less. I've said before, we cannot keep putting Band-Aids on problems that need to be addressed now. Putting Band-Aids on these problems will only cost us more in the long run. When I ran for this position in 2016, one of the issues at hand was the need to improve our school's aging infrastructure. As our colleague, Ms. Thrush, reminds us, as she has today, we have the oldest schools and one of the oldest bus fleets, and we can only do so much when state funding is constantly being cut. We are one of only a few counties in the state that do not have any local option sales tax. When you're visiting Orlando, Gatlinburg, or even if you just go to Walton County or Santa Rosa County, they all have local option sales tax to help with their infrastructures, whether it's with schools or roads. So when I buy products or stay in those areas, I'm paying a tax that pays for all the new schools that are being built in those areas. Just recently, one of our principals and her family were on vacation in another part of the state. She took a picture of a new school that was being built with a local option sales tax. I can assure you that many tourists who visit that part of the state were helping contribute to the construction of that school. The half-cent sales tax is a fair tax, and all will help contribute. Whether they are local or visiting, it doesn't put the tax burden solely on the property owners in our county. Yesterday, we all received an email from a principal showing how bad their cafeteria floors are. We also received an email regarding the issues of buying used buses. This is the reality we face with the funds or lack of funds we receive for capital improvements. We cannot fix floors in a timely manner. We cannot properly add on to schools that are busting at the seams, and we have to resort to buying used buses. So my fellow school board members, I ask that we take in consideration allowing Ms. Jackson to confer with her team to see what we can do to put this on the general ballot in November and report back to us as soon as possible, as time will be of the essence. I also want to remind the general public that this is not a short-term tax, but a long-term investment in the future of our school district. However, we will need to act quickly as the Florida legislature passed Bill 7087 and signed into law. And I will at this time ask Mr. Kelly and Ms. Scallon to please come up. And I also have a handout that I would like to pass to all board members here. I'll let you just. And the reason why I'm calling them up there is I would like them to explain this law.
The new law that was enacted in reference to a half-cent sales tax, a discretionary surtax, placed some additional requirements on a school district if they were to pursue this option. And so those requirements are that we would have to have a performance audit by a CPA firm procured by OPAGA. Now, it's also my understanding that in this instance, OPAGA would be able to pay for that performance audit from carryover funds as long as they had carryover funds. And so they would come in, they would perform a performance audit. It would have to be completed 60 days prior to placing the item on the referendum, and it would have to be posted to our website and would have to remain there for 2 years. And so that basically is what I know about the legislation.
Mr. Kelly?
I would just, to highlight what Ms. Gallen said, was the 60-day. So obviously if the election is November 6th, this has to be completed and published 60 days prior, September 6th. And obviously there's a timeline. This is new legislation. So OPAGA, we, engaging OPAGA and doing all this. And there's multiple school districts that have indicated they're going to pursue a sales tax. So this is going to be all new ground.
There's a queue formed.
There will be a queue forming, I'm sure, very quickly. And so we wanted to bring it to the board's attention, what this new law possibly means. And the necessary, if we hope to meet a November ballot, that there's a new timeline involved. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kelly. All right, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you, Dr. White. As I said, we owe it to the future of our school district to at least give the citizens of our county an opportunity to invest in the future of our schools. Thank you, Dr. White, and my esteemed colleagues for allowing me this opportunity to address this issue.
All right, so of course, the thing that I'm trying to do always is to move things forward.
Yes, sir.
And so I want to make sure that I understand what the request is. Is this going to be in the form of a motion Monday night, or is it simply an information request that you're making of the superintendent?
I am asking her to get with her staff to at least figure out what we need to do. I don't know if we necessarily need to bring it to a vote at the next meeting, but maybe at the next school board meeting at the end of the month, maybe have something in place. Is that feasible for us to?
We certainly can.
Okay. But I do think we need to at least give her the opportunity to look in and see what we need to do.
Okay, so it sounds like then this is an information request, Superintendent, for you to meet with your staff and come back and provide us, I guess, some kind of timeline.
Correct.
In terms of how.
What we need to do,
right.
And considering the law, that's
right.
What we have to do to be.
Right. And would this also include the proposed project list?
It can, and also safety, whatever safety issues the schools might have.
Okay, so I'm hearing project list for the schools, I'm hearing school safety, and would this include the duration of this tax?
I believe that we were going with a 10-year, so okay. I would say for 10 years.
Okay, and Mr. Destin?
Just a clarification, we also had a project list. We had a program ready to go. Are we going to revamp that, do that completely, or are you going to recommend that we go forward?
Yeah, I think looking at the project list, I think we'll make it through through this law, because I think all those are high priority needs for the schools.
I think after meeting with the sheriff this afternoon, I'll have a little bit better idea of safety and safety funds and some things that we might be able to do. I think the project list that we currently have is pretty exhaustive.
Right.
And it's every school.
Right.
And I think that I don't know that we would have time to do that with this law.
I would think not.
My concern is how long will we have to wait on that CPA to come in and do the audit? I mean, that's my concern.
Right.
And Rita and I have talked about this, so we're gonna move forward. We probably will use the list we already have with any additions or deletions that I would bring to the board after speaking with the sheriff and seeing if there's anything else that we might need to do.
Okay, so this is, in addition to the security issues, this is really just a basic question about timeliness and how
Yes.
we have to move forward to get it on the ballot in November?
Yes, sir.
And this is information that you're going to bring back to us?
And we have already, we already have a relationship with Mr. Lux and talking through some other things. And I don't know if you have spoken with Mr. Lux.
I have.
And what, if you would mind sharing with the board what his response was?
Well, because of our heavy military community, he's got to get those absentee ballots out before, I think, September 15th, I think is what it is. So that's why time is of the essence. So.
Okay.
All right. And so.
And by the way,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Lux said if any board members would like to, he would be happy to answer those.
And so this would be, I think we're talking November ballot. And would there be any associated cost to put this on the ballot? I mean, I'd like to know that.
Certainly.
That probably can be put into that report, whatever the information
Okay,
is.
all right.
Okay.
And the other thing that, and we've already talked about this, but to point out that last time, this was a citizens initiative, which was also a citizens withdrawal. And so I don't know, Superintendent, if you might share in your information with the board, if there's a citizens group that will be working to help support us in this?
At this time, I do not know of one.
Okay.
We wanted to wait on direction. I wasn't sure if the board was going to move forward with this. We can make some contacts. We certainly can. But this is strictly an initiative of the district at this time.
Okay. And so, not being familiar with all the laws concerning involvement of the board, for example, Mr. McInnes will certainly look to you for direction in terms of participation in this matter as to basically how far can that participation go by the school board. And I would think that the district certainly would want to have the same clarification so that we're not in abridgment of any of those matters. Any further comments or questions?
No, sir. Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, I have a similar item under my business, Superintendent. You know, we have a new law, and in my mind, it's a good thing that we're going to put the state and the national motto in all of our school buildings, and including this building, and that will be, "In God We Trust." And so I'm asking, ma'am, that if you and your staff could come forward with a proposal so that we can have something we can all be proud of, that we put up in our schools and in our district facilities. You may need some board action to pay for that.
Probably.
Or some other ways to pay for that. So if you could bring back to us some information about how we can do that and what it might look like, I feel like saying hallelujah. All right, so that's all that I have. Anything else, board members? All right, how about staff? Anything? All right, how about from the association business?
No, sir, thank you.
Superintendent, Mr. McInnes? All right, we got through it. We're adjourned.